information contained in this podcast is an expression of opinion and does not constitute investment advice. This is the Gold Money Podcast with Alistair MacLeod, keeping you up to date with expert opinion on precious metals and the markets.
Hello, this is Alistair MacLeod on behalf of Gold Money, and with me on the line from Arlington in North Virginia is Adam Kokesh, who runs Adams versus the Man. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you.
Now, you're very much involved with the libertarian movement, as I understand it, in America. Ron Paul has, I think, sort of stepped down after a very, very good, strong campaign. How do you see the libertarian movement in America developing from here?
Well, it's debatable whether it was a strong campaign, and that's when we see today, actually, as of today, Jesse Benton, his former campaign manager, campaign chairman, and campaign strategist, now going to work for Senator Mitch McConnell. There are a lot of people in the movement who are coming to the realization that the Ron Paul campaign was sabotaged to at least a certain degree. But what Ron Paul accomplished can never be taken away from him, which was that he brought the memorization by being such an effective candidate for president. And I think in a sense, I have to remind people, because there are a lot who are asking this question, where does the liberty movement go from here? And it's kind of the wrong question to be asking. If you really believe in individualism, you should be asking what comes next for you as an individual. And in that sense, I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned, a lot of takeaways and things that I would hope people would take unto themselves as lessons learned from the Ron Paul phase of the American libertarian movement, for all the ways that it has grown as a result of his efforts. You know, we as a movement certainly have plenty of incredible opportunities before us, but ultimately we have to decide as individuals what's right for us and what's going to provide the best course of action for our lives. So for me, I'm really excited to be continuing building my business as an independent liberty media operation. But, you know, there is kind of a split right now as people go, you know, sort of one of two ways. Either they want to follow the not quite libertarians back into electoral politics, back into the Republican Party, who are willing to compromise, who, you know, I mean, then you have guys like Wayne Allen Root, now former chair of one of the national committees of the Libertarian Party, going to campaign for Mitt Romney. And then you have the people that are realizing you're never going to be able to vote yourself free, and that changing the paradigm is what counts more, and making it more difficult for government to do business, going into agorism, going into, you know, living a lifestyle that makes it harder for the government to oppress others and exploit you. So I think for me, going that route, politics being an essential part of the movement towards liberty, but kind of a secondary thing to the broader shift of the paradigm and people making decisions to make government less relevant in their lives.
Right. One thing that occurs to me is that when people use the term libertarian, they try and pigeonhole libertarians, if you like, into a sort of a category of, well, you know, there are people who think this way, and therefore, you know, we can put them in a pigeonhole and we can ignore them. Now, that certainly, I feel, is a problem over here in Europe. Do you get the same problem over there? Do people try and, you know, call you libertarians and therefore pigeonhole you?
Well, again, the people that fall for that are the ones that are the ones saying, oh, you know, Ron shouldn't do that, he's going to make the movement look bad, or Adam shouldn't do that because it's make the movement look bad, or, you know, Jesse Benton is you know, making us all feel embarrassed to call ourselves whatever. And it's like, it's really playing into the sad guilt by association game that mainstream politics wants to play. So I kind of want to reject all arguments that are kind of that are along those lines, because there is some legitimacy to them. I don't want to reject them outright, but I want to hear them. But when you're worried about being pigeonholed, you're not free. When you're worried about a label being applied to you having a certain stereotypical connotation that goes with it, you're not free in the most important way possible, which is to be free of what others think of you. And that's not to say that you should not care what other people think of you, but if you decide how to live your life based on the opinions of others over the opinion of yourself, then you're definitely not free.
Yeah, I understand that, Adam, but I think there is another point, and that is that people won't, that by if you like, putting you into a category as a libertarian, it means they don't have to think, or they tell themselves they don't have to think that this person who calls himself a libertarian, or who I've just categorized as a libertarian, actually is a serious thinker. Now, that's not my view. I mean, I'm sure there are lots of libertarians who are not serious thinkers, but I think anyone like you who's actually spent a lot of time and effort to put together a radio show and all the rest of it actually does think about the economics, if you like, the relationship of what government should be doing and so on and so forth. And I think I'm right in saying that you actually stood for Congress in New Mexico some time ago. So the point about pigeonholing is that it's very, very easy to dismiss everything in the background that drives a man like Adam Kokesh. So in terms of how do you see the economic situation? I mean, let me put it another way around. Is the thing that drives your libertarianism an economic analysis, or is it a more sort of, I want to be free, if you like, a more sort of liberal analysis in the sense that I don't want government telling me what to do? I mean, what makes you tick?
Well, to even suggest such a potential divide is to suggest that liberty can be separated into personal freedom and economic freedom. And of course, I would reject that. But I think it's really, and I could tell you that it's, for me, the real motivator, in a spiritual sense, in what motivates my message and my analysis is the morality and the philosophy. But in the same way, I can look at that from the economic perspective. And I have a video that I'm quite proud of called Taking Austrian Economics to the Extreme in 1 minute. And it's about... don't let me take more than 1 minute to explain it. It's about if you really understand all human interactions to be economic transactions, you can actually separate the monetization or the monetized economy from the rest of the real economy and understand that the monetized economy is simply the part that the government has managed to exert a particular influence over through the scam that is monetary policy. But if you see, for example, a romantic relationship or a marriage or a family relationship as an economic relationship, it's a voluntary interaction in which value is exchanged and both parties feel that they're getting benefited from it, then that's an economic transaction as well. And in that sense, it's not dehumanizing, it's elevating that. Because what we do by buying into the monetized economy being the only economy is that we fail to value those things properly. And we end up falling for the government propaganda that would have us see so many other economic transactions as less valuable. So I really believe that when I say I am motivated by the message because I want to create a better world for my children, I could say that that's a moral thing. I could say that that's a personal gratification thing, or I could say that that's an economic thing because it's something that I value. I value sharing my vision with the world. I value being able to get up on a soapbox every day. I value knowing that I'm part of the evolutionary process of humanity evolving past statism, which I really think is a phase that we're evolving past right now. So to look at the broader situation, if you want my take on the economic situation in the United States, we're actually seeing a really interesting process as unemployment gets higher and higher and higher, at least by the traditional monetized economy measurements of it, because you have real unemployment close to 25%, depending on various estimates, while the government's figure, which we know, it's obvious, it's not counting unemployment, it's counting people who have become unemployed within a discrete recent period of time. Almost more accurate as a rate. It's the rate at which people are becoming unemployed, not the rate at which people are unemployed. But they're also, remember, counting only real jobs, only jobs that are registered with the government that you have to fill out a form to get. They're not counting jobs where people are working under the table. So in that sense, it is tough to see government going through its death throes. And I think with the talk of QE3, it's really, I see it as the banksters getting their last licks in a dying system, and the police state being a kind of attempt to corral the public while that's going on, but it's not going to work because its course has already been set in you could say by fate, by economic trends and realities, that the system is unsustainable, and people are seeing the superiority of working in the agora as opposed to in the government destroyed, distorted, so-called white market.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think one of the points you made in that is the inaccuracy of government statistics. I mean, unemployment numbers in the United States are notorious, and I think John Williams of Shadow Stats has educated a lot of people about that one. But it's not just that. I mean, you touch on the black market. The black market is not included in GDP. The most efficient part of an economy, I would argue, is the black market. Moving away from that sort of activity and, sort of getting onto a higher plane and what happens with money itself in America, do you get the sense that the government just doesn't care too much about the value of money, in the sense that it undertakes actions in terms of expanding the money supply through the Fed, admittedly, in total ignorance or totally ignoring the possibility that actually they're trashing the currency? Is that something that worries you?
It's a good, serious question. Your question really comes down to, is it incompetence or conspiracy, basically, right?
No, well, I suppose you could look at it that way, but I don't think so, because I think really behind my question is the fact that the people who are in power, for better or worse, we have to assume are doing the job as best they can. Now, they may be
Whoa.
Okay.
Whoa. I don't know. That sounds like political Stockholm syndrome to me.
That's nicely put.
Because really, when the best understanding of government comes from acknowledging that the purpose of government is not to serve the people. The purpose of government is to exploit people. And there are people who are hired by the real beneficiaries of the system as frontmen, as politicians, to make us think that they are trying to serve us, that government is set up with our interests at heart, or that they really want the best for us. They want the best for us the same way a farmer wants the best for his cows. They want you, as long as you stay in the pen, as long as you're there when it's time for the slaughter, as long as you're milkable, we want you to do well. And to get more to the specifics of your question, I suppose when it comes to monetary policy, like I said, I think what we're seeing now is in Europe and in the United States, the true beneficiaries from the system getting their last licks in, saying, hey, this particular scam that we have going right now is not going to last long. We need to get every drop of milk that we can out of these cows by this scam before it goes away. And I've been thinking for a while now that there's going to be some kind of showdown as the fiat currencies of the world start to collapse between those who want real money and those who want a global fiat currency system. And I have a lot of faith in people that want real money, especially in the age of the internet, that we're going to be able to at least demand alternative systems. And in a way, it's kind of irrelevant because it's already happening. You have the rise of Bitcoin on the internet. You have local currencies. You have a huge trend in the United States for barter, for people avoiding paying taxes, for people using as barter tokens, using gold and silver. Dime cards are a recent phenomenon here in the United States. People taking the pre-1964 U.S. dimes that are I think 92% silver, and they laminate them in cards and they use them for barter that way. So I really think that what we're seeing is it's a combination of conspiracy and incompetence. You have but at its heart, it is a conspiracy. It is people conspiring to exploit the American people and the people of the world really through fiat currency. And it's not like it's a conspiracy that's any kind of secret. I think it's simply an understanding the nature of it and being like, well, wait a second. Someone's getting rich and someone's getting screwed and someone set it up this way deliberately. I wonder why that could be. And having the integrity to simply face up to that and say, yeah, it's because there are rich, powerful people who are in charge of very important mechanisms in the economy that don't give a crap about any of us except as tax cows.
Well, it's certainly true that if you start managing an economy, either from a monetary point of view or in terms of physical intervention in industry, you're going to create losers and you're going to create winners out of that. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to say that the whole objective of lobbying politicians is to ensure that you're going to be a winner out of the process and not a loser.
Wait, that's not lobbying. I don't know. Maybe it's just a different terminology over there.
Yeah.
But when we think of lobbying in the United States, it's more pleading a case. And there are important lobbying efforts that actually do have sway over politicians. When the AARP goes into congressional offices, they have some pull. But it's because of money, and it's not that people lobby politicians as much as they buy them in advance.
That's true, and of course there's then there's the whole subject of donations. But perhaps we shouldn't go there. So I think the sense I get from what you're saying, Adam, is that you are actually quite worried about what is going to happen to the dollar. And so, what would you see as the alternative? You've touched on currency competition or competition for different things for money, whether it's Bitcoin or something, which is an interesting point because that I find echoed in different countries by people who are worried about what's happening to paper money. But are you protecting yourself by by buying silver, gold, something like that, sort of putting aside, or what?
Absolutely. But for me, the strategy is definitely more than that. Absolutely, I don't keep savings in cash. That's just silly. That's just bad economics.
Yes, it goes. If it goes wrong, you kick yourself.
Yeah,
for having it in cash.
I also believe that, especially in my line of work, where I'm challenging the government on a daily basis and engaging in civil disobedience and the kind of activism that I do, I don't keep anything in any kind of digital mechanism or a form that the government can confiscate or isolate me from or anything like that. And I have my savings in a big safe. I have physical gold and silver. I have guns and ammo, and I don't think of it as there are a lot of reasons for that. It's not just because I think that there's a collapse coming, because I don't think that's a reasonable motivator for being scared or having a bunker or anything like that. Although, if someone wanted to give me a bunker, I would certainly accept the keys to it. I think it's really important to protect yourself from what's coming with government and protect yourself from inflation, but also to protect yourself from simply having something confiscated. They can't freeze my assets that I have in my hands, as opposed to those that are sitting in a digital vault somewhere with a bank. So, I have an LLC, and I use it to minimize my tax liability, basically by, keeping as many of my expenses as business expenses. And I also do as much as possible of my own economic business in barter, in trade. I have a whole team that works for me. None of them get paid as, on the record. None of them get paid a regular salary, and I'll kind of leave it at that because I don't want to create any liability for them. But it's really about, I think, what I would call for myself a personal strategy of agorism, of making government violence as least or as little of a little relevance as possible in my life. And so taking that attitude into every economic decision, which is really every decision that you make, I think is an important strategy for living up to the values of libertarianism, but also has some very important practical benefits.
Right. Okay. Now, that's very, very clear. A very different direction for this question. There is a lot of concern that at some stage the US government will do what FDR did, and they will produce an order so they confiscate gold. Now, I find difficult because, I'm not an American. I'm not in America now. I certainly wasn't in America. I wasn't even born at the time of FDR. But my sort of take on what happened in FDR days is that the situation then was very different from the situation now. Apart from anything else, there were dollar notes which were enfaced, convertible into gold. So you could take your $10 or whatever it is and present it to a federal bank and say, I actually want gold for this. Now, so the situation today is very, very different. But people are very worried that the US government will tap its citizens on the shoulder and say, come on, we want your gold, either for nothing or for market price or whatever it is. How seriously do you take that threat?
That's a very good question, because I would equate that to the threat of gun confiscation or of martial law, and in a sense that means that I'm very encouraged by how things have changed from the days of FDR and when they first made it illegal to buy or to own a certain quantity of gold, and it's because back then you had an enforcement class in the with military and police that you could segregate from the rest of society. You could isolate them and you could propagandize them uniquely, and you didn't have to convince everyone in America to give up their gold, because without the internet, people were relatively isolated. If you put it in the newspaper, hey, the gold, the gold laws are a good thing, and everybody believes that, people can kind of look around and be like, in their communities, really, do you believe this? But they can't look out at the entire world through the internet and be like, wow, everybody thinks this is total crap. Yes. And in that sense, when you talk about martial law, talk about gun confiscation, and the use of the threat of using U.S. troops against American civilians is one that is also being raised as a possibility here because of what happened during Hurricane Katrina, when National Guardsmen were actually sent in to confiscate weapons. And you're like, how the heck did that happen in America? But it happened because you had an incident that created the excuse that allowed the propagandized and controlled enforcing class to go, well, we're being told to confiscate guns by the government. Must be a good thing. And in that sense, if they were to try something more widespread, like I think that part of what we're going to see as government here goes through its death throes or starts to realize that its end is near, is you'll have isolated incidents. You'll have like Waco, Ruby Ridge, and I don't mean to say like it's going to be exactly like that or you're going to have stuff like that. But in that sense, isolated egregious enforcement actions. But because of the internet, because you have a connection with the enforcement class that has never existed before. Unless you can get everybody who's in the military or everybody who's in law enforcement to turn off their smartphones and cut themselves off from the internet, you won't be able to propagandize them like you have been able to in the past and been able to get them to do things that are against the will of the American people that they're enforcing them against. So in that sense, I'm very encouraged, and I think that unless they get a certain amount of social buy-in, remember, the limits of tyranny are described precisely by the tolerance of the oppressed. So in that sense, what we understand, because the internet gives us the ability to process information like never before, puts a very, very hard limit on what the government can get away with, because that message that's on the internet gets to the enforcement class as well as everybody else, like never before.
Yeah. No, I think I can certainly understand that. Now, Adam, where do our listeners find you on the internet? That's what's the best way to do it?
There.
Sorry?
Specifically, if you want to see something with my face on it, adamversustheman.com. I do a daily podcast and a YouTube channel that you can find all through there. We're actually tomorrow moving into our new studio and going to live with that. It'll be 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time starting on Monday. So stay tuned for that. Very exciting developments here. And as always, good things come in from Adam versus the Man.
That sounds fantastic. Well, Adam, thank you very much indeed. And I hope that all the concerns that you've expressed don't come true, though I must admit I'm finding it a bit hard to construct an argument against it. But anyway, there we are. Anyway, so on behalf of all our listeners, thank you very much indeed. And
let me just say, I may be in various ways a short-term or mid-term pessimist or realist, but in the long term, I'm very much an optimist. Humanity is evolving past statism itself. We are coming to a better world because humanity marches on.
And in that one, I sincerely hope you're right, and I'm inclined to agree. So, which is great. Adam, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Subscribe to the Gold Money newsletter at www.goldmoney.com to receive email updates on new articles, videos, and iTunes podcasts from our Gold Research section.